me give you an example of a situation where our child was angry and we were angry and how we dealt with it. Christy comes home, and Christy is in high school at this particular point in time, and she has not done well in her history exam. And Christy wants to study to become a lawyer. And she comes home, she knows history is important for her to be able to get into law school. She comes home and says, "Dad, I failed my history test." Now at that point, how is the child feeling? What are they feeling? What are their emotions? They're probably angry, disillusioned, and happy with themselves. And when they say they have failed, when she said she had failed her history exam, I needed to engage her, but I needed to be careful how I engage her. So I asked her, Christy, I know you worked hard yesterday. I saw you studying. Did you get like 40%? She says, "No, Dad, not 40. I had 69. "Oh, but 69 is not that bad." "Dad, that's a C. I need an A in history." "Christy, how did the other students do?" "Dad, 19 out of 20 failed." "Really? How did Kadenge do?" Now, you see, I can't ask those questions unless I know her friends and her classmates. Kadenge happened to be one of those students who did not need to study. He just sat in class and passed her exams. "Dad, even Kadenge failed. 19 out of 20 failed." She's angry. I'm processing it. And what's the obvious conclusion? Where is the issue? Many would say, obviously, it's the teacher. Obviously, it's the test. So what do you do about it? Well, I went to school. I went to school to speak to the teacher. But I did not go there in anger. I did not go there with my arms akimbo. I met the teacher, and let's just call her Mrs. Julians. Mrs. Julians, you must be disappointed with my daughter's performance in history. She looked at me and says, "Oh, Mr. Mukolwe, you must be Christy's dad." I said, "Yes, I am." Well, and she went through her file. Christy had 69. Actually, she did fairly well compared with the others. And then I asked the question, Mrs. Julians, what can you and I do to help Christy succeed in history? You see what I've just done there? Instead of going in there and blasting the teacher, you see, when 19 out of 20 of your students fail an exam, that teacher is not happy. And nobody understands the emotions of the teacher. So as a parent who wants my child to succeed in that class, I go in there and I empathize with the teacher. So I ask the question, what can you and I do to help our daughter succeed in her exams? She had a very interesting suggestion. She says, "Mr. Mukolwe, Christy is a very bright student, but she has one problem. You see, we have a math lesson immediately after history, and Christy is scared of her math teacher. So during the history lecture, she's doing her math homework. So you help Christy with her math at home, and Christy will do well in history." Isn't that an interesting insight? Well, we went back home and helped Christy with her math, and her history grades improved. Knowing the reason for the anger, knowing the reason for the frustration, and going behind the scenes to find out what is really going on is very helpful in trying to resolve issues of self-esteem. Let's take on the second emotion. This is fear. When we looked at anger, it was a blocked goal. Fear is an uncertain goal. Fear of something unpleasant, very often it's a strong emotion of anticipation or awareness of danger. Something unpleasant is about to happen and you're not quite ready for it. We fear what we cannot control. Fear is provoked when the threat of danger, be it physical or relational, exposes our inability to preserve what we most cherish. Sometimes it's life we are trying to preserve. Sometimes it's just relationships. Adolescents fear not being accepted by the opposite sex, and parents need to be aware of this and not to belittle it. Children will often blame themselves when they see that their parents are having a fight. And if these issues are not resolved, this fear continues into the adolescent years, and we have very fearful adolescents if parents are continuously quarreling. Children fear what will happen if their parents separate. And so you can trace a number of fears in our children to how they see us, the adults, acting and reacting in situations of uncertainty. So, what do men fear? I asked this question once to my audience, and the men said, we fear our wives. And, men fear failure. And, they may say jokingly their wives, but in fact, they fear failure, and especially failing to meet the wife's needs, failing to provide for their families. They really fear that. What about women? Women fear isolation. Women fear loneliness. And these fears, these are just some of the fears. There's a whole list we can go through. But these fears can very easily act on a person and drive them to be a workaholic if you're a man or a woman. Drive a person to be self-preserving. And when people are acting under fear, it really affects their self-esteem. Our third emotion is shame. Shame happens when a goal is not reached, an unreached goal. Shame is the painful sense of having done something wrong or something improper or something immodest. It is the traumatic exposure of our nakedness. We feel an inner ugliness. There's a sense in which you are not naked in a shower unless somebody sees you, because we are very familiar with our own nakedness. When I'm talking about nakedness, I don't just mean the absence of clothes, but very often when a person is involved in something horrible, perhaps a father or a mother or a teenager is watching pornography, or perhaps are involved in drug dealing, or perhaps they're involved in alcohol and they're hiding that habit and they're hoping no one discovers it, and then it gets discovered. This person is ashamed. A man standing in front of a crowd, speaking to the crowd, and his zipper is down. Ooh. Or a woman who's meticulous in her makeup, and she's standing in front of a crowd and she's teaching. And when she goes to the bathroom to freshen herself, she finds that the makeup is all over her teeth, and she's thinking, oh my goodness, was I looking this way the whole time? How come no one ever told me? That traumatic exposure of our nakedness. Now, there are parents who are experts at exposing the nakedness of their children. In an early example, we talked about the 12-year-old young man who's still wetting his bed, and his father exposed that nakedness. Or perhaps it's a young lady, her period just began, and she wasn't ready for it, and she soiled her dress. And instead of protecting her, some other girls shame her. And that really has an effect on the self-esteem of that child. As long as we don't know that other people know what's going on, we are fine. But once we know that our nakedness has been exposed, we really feel ashamed. It is up to us parents to think about anger, shame, and fear. What part do those emotions play in your child raising? What part did those emotions play in your growing up years? Did you resolve your issues of anger, your issues of shame, and your issues of fear? If you did not work through your own issues, you may have challenges in working through these issues with your children. And if you do not successfully work through them with your children, then whatever convictions you're building those children could be very easily nullified, could be very easily eroded in a time where their emotions override their convictions, and they act out of conviction and completely shame themselves, completely embarrass themselves, and end up sinking even lower in their whole area of self-esteem.